Imagine you're just walking down a quiet street on vacation, camera in hand, soaking in the charm of a town you barely know. The air smells like fresh pastries and city stone warmed by the sun. It's peaceful, almost frozen in time. So you do what any tourist would. You raise your phone, frame a quaint little bakery across the road, and snap a photo. That's it. A second of your life. One click. Then you move on, never imagining that a few hours later, the police would be tracking you down, urgently asking to see that exact photo again. And not just out of curiosity, but because there's something in that image, something you didn't notice. Something that changes everything. Hey you. Yeah, you watching this right now, I know why you clicked. You want to know what was in the picture. You want the truth. And I promise you're going to get it. No stalling, no filler, no clickbait. This story is real, and what you're about to hear is going to make you second-guess the photos sitting quietly in your own camera roll. Because sometimes, the scariest things aren't in the shadows. They're hiding in plain sight. Buried in pixels, waiting for someone to zoom in just close enough. So before we dive in, I want you to do something. Think about the last photo you took. Maybe it was your coffee, your pet, a group selfie, or just some random street while you were out and about. Did you really look at it? Did you check the corners? The reflections? The background? Because the person in our story didn't. And that one snap, that one innocent second of capturing a moment, opened the door to a case that had been cold for over a decade. A case no one thought would ever be solved. Until now. Now I know your time's valuable, and trust me, I'm not here to waste a single second of it. This isn't one of those videos where we drag it out to keep you watching. From this moment on, you and we're in this together. I want you to see what the tourists saw. I want you to feel what they felt when the detective leaned in, pointed at the screen, and whispered, "Can you zoom in here?" Because that's where everything started to unravel. That's when the past came roaring back. The person behind the camera is Emma Reyes, a 28-year-old solo traveler from Colorado. She's one of those people who documents everything. Not for Instagram. Not for likes. Just because she genuinely loves freezing little slices of life. People crossing the street, a dog waiting outside a coffee shop, old signs, graffiti, clouds. Her phone is filled with them. She's not a professional, but she sees beauty in ordinary things. And that's exactly what led her to that photo. It was taken in a city most people skip over. Not exactly tourist central, but Emma liked the vibe, gritty, quiet, local. She'd found this side street that felt untouched by time. Cobblestones, brick buildings, faded signs from the 70s. It was like a scene from a movie, and she wanted to capture it before the light changed. She didn't even look at the image right away. Just snapped it and kept walking. That moment, that unseen detail in the background, she wouldn't notice it until much later. But someone else did. When Emma uploaded her street photos to a public online album for her travel blog, a few locals saw it. Nothing unusual, until a retired detective named Thomas Marrow, who'd worked on one of the town's most baffling missing persons cases, happened to click through her gallery. Something in that one photo stopped him cold. His heart started racing. He zoomed in, enhanced it, then enhanced it again. At first, he couldn't believe what he was seeing, because what showed up in the photo shouldn't have been there. It was a detail only someone deeply familiar with the case could recognize. A face, a symbol, a reflection. He couldn't tell exactly what it was at first, but he knew enough to say this. The case wasn't dead. It had just been sleeping. And Emma's photo had accidentally woken it up. That's when the call came. 2 officers showed up at the small hotel Emma was staying at, asking if they could speak to her privately. She was confused, thinking maybe she'd unknowingly broken a rule or gotten someone in trouble. But when they showed her a printed copy of her own photograph, marked with red circles and yellow highlighter, her blood ran cold. They asked if she still had the original file, if she'd noticed anything strange when she took it. They asked if she remembered hearing anything, any voices, footsteps, doors slamming. Emma shook her head, but deep down, something was shifting. Because now that she looked at it again, the photo did feel different. Wrong. Like something was hiding in plain sight. Now here's where it gets personal for you. Because as this story unfolds, you're going to find yourself piecing things together right alongside us. You'll see what Emma saw. You'll hear the questions detectives asked. You'll walk the same streets and spot the clues hidden in plain view. And every time you think you've figured it out, the story will twist just enough to make you doubt everything. That's why I need you to stick with me. Not just to the end, but through every second. Because the final answer, the real truth, it doesn't hit all at once. It creeps up on you. And when it does, you'll want to know that you caught every clue. There's a reason this story is blowing up on Reddit, TikTok, and true crime forums. It's not just the mystery. It's the idea that any of us could stumble into something like this. That the truth doesn't always announce itself with sirens or breaking news. Sometimes, it's sitting quietly in the background of a photo you took without thinking. Just waiting. And when you finally see it, really see it, it changes everything. That's what happened to Emma. And soon, that's what's going to happen to you. But before we go further, I need you to do one more thing. Make a promise. To stay until the very end. Because I'm going to show you something. Something that hasn't been seen publicly. An image. The image. The same one detectives used to reopen the case. But I'm not showing it now. Not yet. You need context. You need to understand what you're looking at. Because once you do, you won't be able to unsee it. This isn't just a story about a tourist and a photo. It's about what happens when you accidentally document a crime. When a lens captures what the human eye can't. When a snapshot becomes evidence. And someone, somewhere, realizes their secret just got exposed by a stranger with a phone. Emma Reyes had been on the road for nearly 3 weeks when she arrived in that quiet little town, the kind of place you don't find on travel blogs or influencer maps. It wasn't famous for anything. No viral food spots, no historic landmarks, just a modest downtown strip with hand-painted signs and buildings that had clearly lived through better decades. But Emma wasn't chasing tourist traps. She preferred the spaces in between, the places where people didn't expect anything to happen. Her itinerary was loose by design, guided more by instinct than recommendations. She'd been hopping between Amtrak lines, sometimes staying in chain motels, sometimes with families she met through a travel network for solo female explorers. She kept a small online blog, nothing major, just a space where she posted her photos and journal entries for a handful of followers who enjoyed her raw, unfiltered take on life off the beaten path. But something about this stop felt different the moment she arrived. Emma didn't sleep that night. The glow of her phone screen stayed lit until dawn, her thumb trembling as she scrolled through the same image over and over, her eyes obsessively darting between the shadowy reflection and that faint, inexplicable handprint. She had emailed herself the original, backed it up to 3 different drives, even uploaded it to a private cloud, just in case. Something in her gut warned her that what she had wasn't just a curious anomaly or an internet mystery waiting to be debunked. It was evidence. And evidence, she was starting to realize, has a habit of disappearing when people don't want it to exist. That fear proved real the next morning, when she awoke to find the image missing from her phone's gallery. Not just moved. Not corrupted.
Gone.
And not just that one photo. Every picture she'd taken in the past 72 hours had been wiped out. Her camera roll was clean, untouched. Like someone had rolled back time. At first, she blamed herself. Maybe she'd tapped the wrong setting. Maybe there was a sync error with her cloud. But when she pulled out her laptop to check the backups she'd uploaded the night before, her heart sank. They were gone too. The folder existed, but the files inside were blank, titled only Untitled JPG and 0 kilobytes in size. The backups were nothing more than shells, empty placeholders where the truth had once lived. She felt her throat tighten, panic swirling in her chest. She hadn't shared the image publicly yet, only with the detectives and her private email. Someone had gotten to it.
Somehow.
And that meant someone was watching her more closely than she thought. She rushed to the local police station, breathless, desperate to confirm if they still had the original copy she'd emailed. But when she arrived, the detective she'd spoken with, the one who had been intensely interested in the photo, wasn't there. She was told he'd taken a sudden leave of absence for personal reasons just that morning. No explanation, no forwarding contact. The officer at the front desk looked confused when she mentioned the photo. "There's no active investigation connected to you," he said, flipping through some digital files. "Are you sure you have the right station?" That's when the cold chill hit her spine. Something had shifted. Something, or someone, was working to erase the trail, piece by piece, and it was happening faster than she could process. Walking back to her room, Emma noticed a woman sitting on a bench across from the antique shop. She hadn't seen her before. She wasn't dressed like a local, too polished, too clean, her outfit more urban than small town. The woman stood when Emma passed, falling into step beside her like they were old friends. "You're Emma, right?" she asked casually, not waiting for an answer. "I heard you've been asking questions. About the bakery. About that picture." Emma froze mid-step, her stomach lurching. The woman continued, voice calm but firm, like someone used to being obeyed. "I'm going to tell you something once. Let it go. You don't want to be the one who brings this story back to life." Then, just like that, she walked away, vanishing around the corner like a ghost who only exists when needed. Emma stood there stunned, heart hammering so loudly she couldn't hear anything else for a moment. Back in her room, she tried again to piece together what she had left. The only tangible evidence remaining was a screenshot she'd sent to a friend via text as a casual, "Look at this cool reflection," message hours before everything spiraled. That low-resolution version, compressed by the messaging app, was all she had now. It wasn't sharp enough to make out the handprint clearly, but the figure in the window, faint, ghost-like, was still there. Her friend, Jamie, had replied with a thumbs-up emoji at the time, but now Emma reread the message thread and noticed something she'd missed before. Jamie had texted back a second message hours later. "Is that someone standing behind you?" Emma had never seen that message. It was buried in the thread, marked unread. The timestamp was 3:13 a.m. Emma's mind raced. She hadn't looked behind her when she took the photo. She hadn't felt watched. But Jamie's question suggested someone, had been closer than she realized. Desperate for answers, Emma booked a meeting with a town historian, a retired professor who maintained a small collection of public records in a dusty room above the library. She hoped he could tell her more about the bakery's history, or if there were records of Jared Fox, the missing artist. But when she arrived, the door was ajar, and the place had been ransacked. Drawers open, files dumped onto the floor, and the old man sitting silently behind the desk, his expression distant and oddly blank. When she asked if he was okay, he responded, "They don't want this found," then refused to say another word. Still, Emma wasn't ready to stop. Not yet. That night, she returned to the scene of the photo, determined to find the same angle, the same lighting, to maybe spot what she missed. The bakery was dark, locked tight. But when she approached the glass, pressing her face to the window, something caught her breath. A faint glow deeper inside, far back, like an old security light or maybe a candle. And just for a moment, barely a second, she thought she saw movement. A flicker. The shape of someone retreating further into the shadows. She backed away fast, pulse in her ears. That's when she noticed the bakery window again. Clean, no handprint. No reflection. But taped to the inside, barely noticeable unless you were inches away, was a note. Handwritten. In red ink. 3 words. "You're already involved." Emma turned, heart racing, certain someone was nearby, but the street was still. Quiet. Empty. And then her phone buzzed. A message. No number. Just a photo. Not hers. A different street. A different time. A woman walking alone, Emma. But the reflection in the store window beside her? It wasn't hers. And she wasn't alone. Emma stared at the photo for what felt like forever, her fingers trembling around her phone as her eyes tried to make sense of what she was seeing. It wasn't a selfie. It wasn't one of her photos at all. Someone had followed her, possibly days ago, and captured a moment she didn't even remember living. The street looked familiar but off, like it had been edited or filtered to appear eerily distant, like a memory she wasn't supposed to recall. What made her stomach twist wasn't just the angle or the voyeuristic precision of the image. It was the reflection beside her. A person, tall, hooded, featureless, standing inches away from her shadow, even though she'd been completely alone that night. Or at least, she thought she had been. The message was clear. Someone was watching, had been watching, and worse, they wanted her to know. Emma did the only thing she could think of. She called Jamie. Her voice cracked as she explained what was happening: the missing photo, the stranger at the bench, the window note, and now this photo that came out of nowhere. But Jamie interrupted her mid-sentence, her tone no longer casual and amused like before. It was tense. "You need to stop," Jamie whispered. "I think something's wrong on my end, too." That's when Emma's pulse kicked up again. Jamie told her she'd received a voicemail that morning from a blocked number. It was silent for nearly the entire message, except at the end, where a distorted voice whispered just 3 words: "Tell her nothing." At first, Jamie had dismissed it as a prank. But after Emma's call, she was no longer sure. Especially because she swore she saw the same figure, hooded, motionless, standing at the end of her block last night just after sunset. She hadn't told anyone. She didn't want to sound paranoid. But now, paranoia seemed like the only rational response. That moment snapped something into focus for Emma. This wasn't just about her. Whoever or whatever was behind this had begun to branch out, to monitor those close to her. It meant one thing. The photo, the original one from the bakery window, wasn't a random accident. She hadn't just stumbled into a hidden truth. She had uncovered something someone had buried with intent. And they were willing to manipulate everything to make sure it stayed that way. Desperate for answers, Emma returned to the one place she had tried to avoid, the town's archives. She'd hoped to stay under the radar, but time was no longer on her side. The assistant archivist, a young man named Tyler who seemed almost too eager to help, welcomed her with an awkward smile. He remembered her from earlier in the week, when she'd stopped by looking for building permits and old photographs. Now, he motioned her toward the back, where less public records were stored. She didn't question why he was being so cooperative, not yet, because she was too focused on one specific thing: blueprints for the bakery building, which she found startled her. According to the original records from the 1930s, the building had a sublevel, one that wasn't marked on any modern floor plan. A narrow staircase, sealed behind what used to be a walk-in freezer. The purpose of the basement wasn't listed, but based on the thickness of the walls and the ventilation system, it had been designed for secrecy. Tyler leaned over her shoulder, eyes darting across the blueprints, and said quietly, "I've seen this before." Emma turned to him sharply. "Where?" she asked. He hesitated, visibly nervous. "Online," he said. "Deep web threads. Years ago. People said it was part of a string of connected properties across the state. Old businesses that weren't just businesses. There were theories: child trafficking, witness silencing, stuff too dark to repeat. But it was always dismissed. No proof." He stopped there, like he'd said too much. Emma pushed further, asking if anyone had tried to investigate. Tyler nodded, glancing around the empty archive room. "Yeah," he muttered. "There was a guy, David Mackey. Local historian. He went deep into it. Collected files, interviews, photos. Said he was getting close to something. Then he fell off the map. Everyone said he moved out of state. But the last post on his forum account just said, 'They know.'" Emma's chest tightened. She'd heard that name before. She remembered seeing an old book review on her blog from a David M., referencing one of her photos from a previous trip, a mural in another small town. Was that a coincidence? Or had he been watching her even then? Just as she was about to ask Tyler more, he stood abruptly. His face had changed. Serious. Distant. "You should go," he said flatly. "I've already helped too much." Emma stood there, confused. He wouldn't meet her eyes anymore. He wouldn't say why. But she knew that look. He was scared. And just like that, she was alone again. Walking out into the warm dusk air, Emma's phone buzzed once more. A new email. No subject line. No sender. Just a single file attached. A video clip. She stopped cold as she hit play. The footage was grainy, filmed from what looked like a security camera across the street from her motel. The timestamp was from 2 nights ago. The video showed her, sitting in the window of her room, lit by her laptop screen. Then, slowly, a shape moved into the frame, a person standing completely still across the street, watching her window. No movement, no sound, just watching. Then the screen glitched and the figure was gone. Emma sank to a bench outside the corner grocery, her mind spiraling with fear and questions. If someone was watching her from that close, how had she not seen them? How many times had they been there? What did they want from her? And more urgently, how far were they willing to go to keep her from finding out? She didn't even hear the car pull up. She barely noticed the sound of the window rolling down beside her until a voice called her name. When she looked over, her breath caught. It was the detective from earlier, the one who had supposedly taken sudden leave. His face was pale, his jaw tight. He didn't smile. "Get in," he said quietly. "You're not safe. And you need to see something." But as she stepped toward the car, a second phone in her bag buzzed. One she hadn't used in months, a backup she forgot she even carried. Only one contact had that number, her brother. The message lit up the screen. "Don't trust him. He's not who he says he is." Emma froze. And for the first time, she wasn't sure which threat to run from, or toward. Emma stood frozen on the sidewalk, the detective's door open before her. The soft click of her brother's warning text echoing in her mind louder than any car horn or city siren ever could. The streets suddenly felt stretched and unnatural, like the edges of a photograph beginning to warp. She looked into the detective's eyes, those same eyes that, just days earlier, had seemed so steady and composed when he first saw her photo, but now something in them had shifted. They looked anxious, starting. Not the look of someone offering help. The car idled in silence, no police radio murmuring in the background, no official laptop clipped to the dashboard. Just two plain water bottles in the cup holders and a smell she couldn't place, like bleach and something else. Something metallic. Her instincts screamed louder than reason. She stepped back, shook her head, and turned to leave. The detective didn't follow. He just shut the door quietly, pulled away slowly, and disappeared around the corner like a fog bank being pulled back by the wind. Emma's feet moved before her brain caught up. She rushed back to the motel, every parked car now feeling suspicious, every shadow behind a curtain a possible watcher. Her hands trembled as she unlocked the room and pushed the door open. She expected to find it tossed or empty, but it looked unchanged until she noticed the chair by the window had been moved 2 inches to the left. She hadn't touched it since the night she sat there reviewing that photo. And now it was angled slightly, like someone had sat there watching the door. Her bag, which she'd left zipped and stashed under the bed, was sitting at the foot of it, open like a mouth. Her laptop screen was black, but warm. Someone had been here, not to steal, but to look. Her stomach dropped. In a panic, she called Jamie. Voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. The third time, it rang once and cut off. That's when her heart truly clenched. Jamie wasn't answering. She always answered. In fact, just last night, she'd texted Emma that she was heading to her cousin's in the next town over for a weekend break, said she needed to clear her head. Emma remembered that text clearly now. It had been short, with none of the usual emojis or inside jokes they always shared. At the time, Emma was too distracted to question it, but now it felt wrong. Too formal. Like someone else had sent it from her phone. She opened their chat and scrolled up, her fingers shaking, comparing language, tone, punctuation. And that's when she noticed a difference. The spacing. Jamie always double-spaced after a period. The last text didn't. Emma stared at it for a long moment, then opened her laptop, logging into Jamie's social media. Last post, 2 days ago. Last story, one of her walking her dog. Only now Emma realized the geotag said a different city entirely, not the cousin's town, not even the same state. Either Jamie had lied, or someone else had posted it to mislead anyone looking for her. Emma's breath started coming faster. Her chest tightened as she grabbed her keys and stormed out of the room, heading straight for the nearest coffee shop with public Wi-Fi and security cameras. She needed people around. She needed to not be alone. The barista gave her a weird look when she ordered and sat near the corner, glancing nervously out the window every few minutes. She fired off emails to everyone she could think of, Jamie's parents, mutual friends, anyone who might have seen or heard from her. All while the surveillance footage from the motel replayed in her head. That faceless figure across the street. That vanished moment. How many others had there been? Her phone buzzed again, pulling her out of her spiral. This time it wasn't a photo or text. It was a video call. Blocked number. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She almost ignored it. Almost. But she hit accept, needing to see who it was. For 3 full seconds, the screen stayed black. Then it flickered. A room came into view. Bare walls, fluorescent light, a chair in the center. Someone sat in it, back turned to the camera. Long hair. A familiar sweatshirt. Emma's stomach flipped. "Jamie," she whispered. The person stirred slightly, but didn't speak. Then the camera panned slowly, deliberately, to a note on the wall behind her. It was handwritten again, same red ink, same eerie precision. For words this time. She asked too much. And then the call ended. Emma nearly dropped the phone. Her vision blurred with tears she hadn't realized were forming. Her hands were clammy, her mind spinning with dread. This wasn't a game anymore. Whoever was doing this had Jamie, or someone who looked like her. The point wasn't just to scare, it was to isolate, to break her down piece by piece, until she gave up the search or lost herself completely in it. But she wasn't going to stop. Not now. Because if Jamie was still alive, she had to keep going. She just didn't know who to trust. Not Tyler, who had grown strangely silent. Not the detective, who might not even be law enforcement. Not the historian, who'd warned her to stop before vanishing. Every piece of truth she touched crumbled, and every thread she followed unraveled into something darker, deeper, more twisted than she'd imagined. Even her own memories had begun to feel unreliable. How long had she really been followed? Was the photo truly the beginning, or had this been building for months, without her ever realizing? She closed her laptop and stared out the window of the coffee shop, watching the street like it was a theater stage. Everyone walking by looked normal, laughing, shopping, living their lives. And yet, any one of them could have been the one behind the lens. Watching her. Waiting. And then she saw it. Across the street, inside the bookstore window. A new photo, printed and taped to the glass. It was her again. But this time, she wasn't alone. There was a figure behind her. And it was holding up a phone. Taking a photo of her taking a photo. The caption scrawled beneath it read, "Still think this started with you?" Emma didn't remember walking out of the cafe. Her body moved on autopilot, numb from shock, her thoughts crashing like waves that didn't stop long enough for her to breathe. That photo in the bookstore window, it felt like a final warning. Or worse, an invitation. Whoever was behind this wasn't just observing anymore. They were leading her somewhere, breadcrumb by breadcrumb, while making sure she knew it was never really her story. She felt sick to her stomach. Somewhere between the fear and adrenaline, something inside her shifted. A question she'd been too afraid to ask herself until now crawled to the surface. What if this didn't start with her at all? Back in her motel room, Emma locked the door, drew the blinds, and pulled out every piece of evidence she had. The photos, the cryptic texts, the old blueprints from the archive, and even the voicemail Jamie had forwarded weeks ago from an unknown number before things got weird. She played it again, hoping something would click. It was still mostly static, but this time she caught something faint in the background. A name. Just one word. It didn't register at first, until she remembered the old historian, David Mackey. The name she'd heard from Tyler, the one who vanished after chasing a similar trail. She scanned the blueprint corner where the initials DM were scribbled in faded pencil. That wasn't a city record. That was his mark. This was personal. The next morning, against every instinct screaming at her to hide, Emma made her way back to the archive, this time without alerting Tyler. She found the locked records cabinet he'd once opened for her, but it had been sealed, welded shut. But across the room, tucked in a forgotten drawer of city planning surveys, she found it. A tattered manila folder labeled only with a set of GPS coordinates and the word Echo. Inside were photographs, decades old, yellowed with time. Buildings she didn't recognize. People with their faces scratched out. Maps marked with XS and dotted lines. But one photo stopped her cold. It was the bakery, but long before it had ever sold pastries. Its sign read Echo Point Research. The people in the photo wore lab coats. And standing in the back row, circled in red pen, was someone who looked terrifyingly familiar. Emma squinted at the man's face, trying to place him. Then her phone buzzed again. A new email. No subject. No text. Just a single attachment. An old newspaper article. The headline read, "Local man dies in lab fire. Wife and child presumed dead." Emma scrolled down to the photo, and her breath caught. The woman in the image had her eyes. Not similar, identical. Same cheekbones, same brow, same faint scar above her lip. The caption read, "Dr. Eleanor Whitmore, victim of suspected arson. Husband believed to have been conducting unauthorized trials." Emma's world spun. Eleanor. Her middle name. She'd always thought she was named after her mother's sister. At least that's what she was told. But now she wasn't sure. Everything she'd believed about her childhood, her adoption, the late-night move across states when she was 10, the sealed records, none of it made sense anymore. She checked the date of the article. She would have been barely 3 years old. It was never just about the photo. She wasn't dragged into this because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was the reason. And someone had spent her entire life erasing that truth. Before she could make sense of it all, her phone rang again. This time, it was Tyler. She almost didn't answer, but something in her gut said she needed to. His voice was panicked, nothing like the calm, polite assistant she'd met. "Emma, listen," he whispered, out of breath. "They're on to me. I shouldn't have helped you. I didn't know who you really were." Emma pressed the phone tighter to her ear. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. There was a pause. Then a low, static-filled breath. "Your last name isn't Whitmore," he said. "It was changed when the records were sealed. You're not just some tourist. You're Echo Subject 11. They've been tracking you since you were a kid. That photo, you weren't the clue. You were the key." The line went dead. Emma's hands shook as she dropped the phone to the floor. Her thoughts raced back through every twist in this nightmare: Jamie's disappearance, the detective's odd behavior, the cryptic photo messages, even Tyler's shifting attitude. It all pointed to one inescapable truth. This was never a story about an innocent traveler stumbling onto a mystery. This was a long-planned, carefully orchestrated return to a life Emma didn't even know she'd lived. Her memories weren't unreliable. They were incomplete. Someone had edited her past, and now they were starting to delete her future. She walked to the bathroom mirror and stared at her reflection, searching for something she no longer recognized. Not a woman who got too close to a local secret. Not a random victim. She was the secret, and the countdown to unlocking it had already begun. Emma didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. Not with the static of Tyler's final words playing on repeat in her head, or the image of that newspaper article burned behind her eyelids. She paced the worn motel carpet like a caged animal, every sound from the parking lot outside setting her nerves on fire. The realization that she was the story, that everything had been leading to her, not away, was heavier than anything she'd felt in her life. She thought the fear had peaked with Jamie's video, with the faceless threats and disappearing clues. But now, that fear had shape, history, and blood in its veins. And it was closing in. At dawn, she drove. No destination, just motion, away from the motel, the bakery, the archive. Every mile was a silent negotiation between fight and flight. But as the sun began to rise, casting long shadows through the windshield, Emma made a decision she'd been avoiding since the first message arrived. She drove to her mother's house. Not her adoptive mother. The woman who raised her was kind, gentle, and had protected Emma from the world, even if it meant lying. No, she needed to see the woman who called herself her biological mother. Eleanor's sister. The one who signed the adoption papers. The one who, years ago, had promised Emma she came from love. If there were answers buried in her past, they started with her. The house hadn't changed. Same creaky porch steps. Same sunflower wind chime tapping against the gutter. Emma's hand hovered above the doorknob longer than she expected. When the door finally opened, the look on her aunt's face wasn't surprise. It was resignation, as if she'd known this moment would come and dreaded it ever since. "You found it, didn't you?" she asked softly. Emma nodded, barely trusting her voice. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and old paper. Emma sat at the kitchen table, fingers clenched around a lukewarm coffee mug she couldn't bring herself to drink from. "Who am I?" she finally asked. Her aunt exhaled, then walked to a locked cabinet Emma hadn't noticed before. From it, she retrieved a box, wooden, aged, the initials EW carved into the lid. Inside were documents, photos, even an old cassette tape labeled Echo, Day 93. Emma stared as her aunt began unfolding a truth that didn't feel real. Her parents hadn't just been researchers, they were part of a covert psychological trial funded by a private defense contractor. A project meant to test long-term memory manipulation using immersive environmental conditioning and audiovisual triggers. Children raised inside synthetic family structures, unaware they were subjects. Emma's mother had rebelled, tried to escape the program with her daughter, and died in the process. Emma was smuggled away, given a new identity, and the trail was buried, until someone decided to dig it up again. The room tilted. Emma felt sick. Everything in her life, her favorite lullaby, the layout of her childhood home, even the scar on her left hand, were all part of a designed narrative. But why now? Why resurface after all these years? Her aunt didn't know, or wouldn't say. That night, as Emma tried to process it all, a burner phone, one she didn't recognize, buzzed in the bottom of the wooden box. A message blinked onto the screen. "Return to Echo Point. Alone. Midnight. Or Jamie dies." Emma stared at the words until they blurred. It was a setup. A trap. Every instinct screamed that much. But the thought of Jamie, possibly chained in a concrete basement somewhere, was unbearable. She grabbed her keys, ready to race toward danger again, but her aunt grabbed her wrist. "There's something else," she whispered. "Someone else you need to talk to first." She handed Emma a faded photograph. A man standing beside a young girl in a park. The man's face wasn't familiar, but the child's was unmistakably Emma. "He worked with your father," her aunt said. "He disappeared after the fire. But he's been watching you. Protecting you. His name is Marcus. He's the only one who can help you now." Emma's head spun. A man had been shadowing her entire life from the shadows? If he was protecting her, why didn't he ever reveal himself? Or was he the one behind the camera this whole time? She felt the crushing pressure of an impossible choice. Go to Echo Point and risk walking into the arms of whoever orchestrated this nightmare, or delay to seek out this Marcus, gambling that Jamie had more time. Every second mattered. Every move could be the last safe one. But Emma couldn't divide herself in two. She sat in her car under a blood-orange sky, the air around her thick with silence. The phone buzzed again. A second photo came through. This time, it was a time-stamped image of Jamie in the same chair, same stark lighting. But this time, she was conscious and crying. The message below it was short. No police. No backup. No more delays. Emma's eyes burned. Her chest tightened. She didn't know who she could trust. Marcus could be real. He could be the final lie. But one thing was certain. Whoever pulled the strings was done playing games. And now, Emma had just one night to decide whose life mattered more, her best friend's, or the only truth that could set them both free. The drive to Echo Point felt like drifting through a dream soaked in gasoline. Emma's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than she realized, her knuckles bone white, her mind spinning in circles. She couldn't stop. The wind howled outside the car, but inside it was silent, save for her breathing, shallow and sharp. The roads narrowed as she neared the outskirts of town, trees growing denser, the night darker. The coordinates led her to an abandoned industrial park surrounded by rusted fencing and half-toppled security cameras, still blinking with dim red lights as if they hadn't been fully dead for years. Echo Point wasn't a place. It was a staging ground, a buried memory, a lie wrapped in steel and concrete. She parked and stepped out into the biting cold. Midnight. No voices. No footsteps. Just shadows. Then she saw it, a flickering yellow bulb above a door, just past the old water tower, the only light in a graveyard of structures. She walked toward it, pulse pounding like war drums in her chest. The door creaked open before she even touched it. And there he was. Tyler. But not the version she'd known. Not the soft-spoken, jittery assistant who helped her dig through documents or kept her calm when everything began to unravel. This Tyler stood taller, straight-backed, his expression stripped of all warmth. He was dressed in black, an earpiece tucked behind his neck. And he was holding her phone, the burner. Emma froze, 1,000 realizations crashing down in a wave of betrayal. "You were never supposed to get this far," he said, his voice flat. "But we underestimated you. He always said you'd wake up eventually." Emma stepped back, rage and heartbreak battling in her throat. "Jamie. Where is she?" Her voice cracked. Tyler motioned toward the hallway. "Alive. For now. But this doesn't end the way you think it does." Behind him, 2 more figures appeared. One was a man in a white lab coat, older, with piercing blue eyes and a surgical calmness that made her skin crawl. The other was her aunt. Emma's stomach dropped. "You," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her aunt didn't flinch. "I never stopped protecting you," she said quietly. "But protection sometimes means control. Your mother wanted to burn the whole system down. I chose to contain it." Emma shook her head. The betrayal ran deeper than blood. It had been stitched into the very fabric of her life. "You lied to me," she said. "All of you." Tyler stepped closer, holding up a small tablet. On it, live footage of Jamie flashed across the screen. Bound but breathing. Eyes red but alert. "You're not the only one," Tyler said. "There are more. Dozens. Scattered across the country. Children like you, raised in false homes, monitored since birth. Echo was never just about one subject. You were one of many." He turned the tablet toward her. Images flickered. Faces, names, timestamps, entire profiles. Some were kids she remembered from her childhood. Others she didn't recognize at all. They were all part of it. All part of her. The scientist finally spoke. "Emma, we're on the brink of something extraordinary. Your mind holds years of layered programming, data we couldn't extract until you began to awaken naturally. That photograph you took? It wasn't a coincidence. It was your mind guiding you home. You're the key to activating the others. That's why we brought you here. We need you to finish what your parents started. But this time, willingly." Emma's throat tightened. Everything inside her screamed to run, to fight, to destroy every inch of this place. But then the footage of Jamie flashed again, and the line between bravery and recklessness blurred. "What happens if I say no?" she asked. Tyler didn't blink. "Then we make you forget. Again. And we start over. With someone else." It was a choice carved with a scalpel. Agree to unlock the memories buried inside her, and possibly unleash something far bigger than she could control. Or walk away and lose the only person left who still loved her. Her knees nearly gave out from the weight of it. She wanted to scream. She wanted to burn this entire nightmare to the ground. But then she remembered something, the cassette tape. Echo, day 93. Still in her bag, hidden under a sleeve of granola bars. Her fingers brushed it like a lifeline. Her aunt must have seen her expression shift. "You don't know what's on that tape," she warned. "Your father made it before the fire. It's not meant for you." Emma met her eyes. "Then why keep it?" No one answered. She stepped back, holding the tape like it was loaded. "You want me to activate something? Fine. But I decide how. No more commands. No more shadows. You want to see what's in my mind? Then let's see it together." Tyler's jaw clenched. The scientist reached forward. And then, all at once, the power in the building cut. Darkness. Alarms. Footsteps. And a voice, distorted through the intercom. "Subject 11 is not alone." The blackout plunged everything into chaos. Emergency lights sputtered to life, painting the concrete walls in blood-red hues as alarms shrieked from every corner of the facility. Emma's heart pounded like thunder in her chest, but her grip on the cassette tape never loosened. In the confusion, Tyler had reached for his earpiece, barking orders, while the scientists lunged toward a hidden console, only to be tackled by someone bursting through the side door in a blur of motion and instinct. Marcus. He was real. And he didn't come quietly. Emma's breath caught as she watched the man from the faded photograph, older now, eyes sharper, face scarred with time, take down two armed guards with military precision. The air erupted with tension as commands were shouted and bodies scrambled for position. Her aunt, for the first time, looked afraid. "You don't understand what you're doing," she hissed. But Emma did. For the first time, she truly did. This was never about one girl finding her truth. It was about an entire generation being molded like clay, their memories curated, their emotions coded into compliance. And now, the dam had finally cracked. Marcus pulled Emma behind cover, speaking fast. They activated the failsafe. Once the data sync finishes, the protocol spreads across the network. Not just to other subjects. Everyone with a connected neural signature could be pulled in. Emma blinked. "You're saying this is viral?" He nodded grimly. Behavioral conditioning through embedded visual and auditory triggers. You weren't just the key, they planned to use your reawakening as the ignition. And Jamie, she's the backup. Emma's mind spun. They had preloaded the system with multiple triggers, each person unknowingly carrying a part of the puzzle. If she didn't stop the upload, the conditioning could go live. She looked at the cassette. "What's on this tape?" she asked. Marcus hesitated. "Your father's override." But it was hidden in analog for a reason. Once it plays, it wipes the entire archive. Everything, including Jamie's last known coordinates. Emma's stomach dropped. It was the final failsafe. A nuclear option. The lights flickered again. Then a voice echoed through the building speakers. Tyler's voice, but modulated, rehearsed, like it had been recorded years ago. Subject 11. Please proceed to Node 0. Accept integration. You are the origin. She sprinted through hallways lined with flickering bulbs and the ghostly hum of humming servers. Marcus covered her, clearing paths and locking doors behind them. The Node 0 chamber was massive, dome-shaped, like a planetarium from a dystopian future. A single console stood in the center, surrounded by cables and blinking interfaces. A screen above it pulsed with blue light, and Jamie's image appeared again. Still alive, still waiting. Emma stepped to the console, heart in her throat. Her aunt appeared behind her, this time without guards. Just tears. "I was trying to protect your potential," she said softly. "We were supposed to fix the world, remove trauma, erase hate, build peace." Emma shook her head. "You stole lives. That's not peace. That's control." Then she inserted the tape. The room went still. A hiss, then static. Then her father's voice, tired, but unmistakably human, filled the dome. "If you're hearing this, Emma, they failed. They tried to weaponize your empathy. But what makes you powerful isn't what they planted in your mind. It's what you created on your own. You are not their experiment. You are not a subject. You are my daughter. And you choose what happens next." The system glitched. Lights flashed in erratic pulses. Error messages streamed across the monitors. Emma felt her knees weaken as a high-pitched tone cut through the air, and then everything collapsed. The screens, the servers, the signals.
Gone.
In one wave of analog clarity, the network was fried. The upload stopped. But Jamie, her screen went dark too. Emma fell to her knees, tears spilling as she screamed her best friend's name into the void. But then a static hum returned, and slowly, the image blinked back, Jamie alive, coughing, but smiling through tears. "I knew you'd find me," she said, barely above a whisper. Marcus stepped forward. "They'll come back for this. Echo wasn't just here. It's global. But you cracked the system. You gave others a chance to break free too." Emma looked around the darkened chamber, littered with the remains of broken dreams and corrupted data. She had won, but not the kind of victory that left anyone whole. Just breathing. Just surviving. As they walked out into the cold night, the first blue and red flashes of real law enforcement cut through the fog. Someone, maybe Marcus, had called in the cavalry. But it wasn't over. Back in her motel room a week later, Emma was packing to leave when she noticed a slip of paper under her door. No name. Just a photo. Another child. Another face she didn't recognize. And the words scrawled beneath it. They were watching her too. Emma sat by the window of a quiet farmhouse in the Catskills, miles away from the ruins of the life she used to know, the morning light spilling across the kitchen floor like a forgotten promise. The world outside looked ordinary, birds tracing lazy arcs through the sky, leaves rustling in the soft breeze, but inside her, everything had changed. The wounds weren't visible, but they ached in places even silence couldn't reach. The network was gone. Echo, as it had existed, had been severed from its own machinery. But the deeper web, the psychological roots that had burrowed into the lives of so many, remained embedded in memories, in choices, in the identities of those unknowingly shaped by a hand they'd never seen. For them, peace would never be a complete erasure. It would be something they earned every single day, one truth at a time. She hadn't seen Tyler since that night, but reports suggested he had vanished without a trace. No fingerprints. No online history. It was as if he'd never existed, his entire presence scrubbed clean by a backup protocol Emma had only uncovered too late. Her aunt, on the other hand, was facing charges: conspiracy, unlawful human experimentation, and obstruction of justice. But in the moments Emma sat with her before the FBI took her away, she didn't find rage or satisfaction. Just sadness. They had both been raised in systems built on manipulation. Her aunt had merely chosen to lean into it, believing she could steer it. Emma had chosen to break it. Jamie, now safe and recovering in a clinic outside Seattle, had started speaking to a therapist, something neither of them would have imagined necessary a year ago. But it was. Healing wasn't linear. Some days, they laughed about the absurdity of it all. Other days, they cried without knowing why. But through it all, they stayed connected. That, more than anything, was the most defiant thing they could do. The names and faces of the other children, the ones Emma had seen on the tablet, haunted her still. Some had been found. Others were just beginning to realize their lives weren't built on truth. A private task force had been assembled to track the remaining Echo facilities, led in part by Marcus, who now operated as a consultant under federal protection. He never told Emma where he went between operations, but he always sent postcards. One simply read, "Still out here, still watching." As for Emma, she chose something different. No more hiding, no more aliases. She wrote, "Not everything, not the whole truth, but enough." A memoir, disguised as fiction, published under her real name. It caught fire online, especially on YouTube, where vloggers dissected every chapter, true crime channels speculated wildly about which parts were real, and Reddit threads ran endlessly with theories and keyword-laced videos like, "Mind control project hidden in your memories?" Or, "Was this real? The girl who unplugged the network." She never confirmed anything. She didn't need to. Let the world wonder. Let them search. That was the point. But the final twist came weeks later, when Emma returned from the market and found another envelope on her doorstep. This one didn't contain a photo. It held a small, square memory card. No return address. No markings. Just a note. This isn't the end. It never was. She stared at it for a long time before walking to her desk and locking it away. For now, it could wait. She had earned her breath back. Her life. Her name. And somewhere out there, beyond the forests and the flickering screens, others like her were beginning to remember. To wake up. To wonder why a single image, snapped by a tourist on an ordinary street, could unravel everything they'd ever known. So, if you ever come across a photo that feels familiar, but you can't explain why, maybe look again. Maybe it's not just your memory that's reacting. Maybe it's something deeper. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't scream. It waits. Hidden in plain sight until the right eyes see it. And once they do, There's no going back.